Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pursuit of Relentless podcast. You have your host here, Alaina. And today I have one of my favorite Instagram reel followers here. Cody Isabel is here with me today from Mind Brain Body Lab. And I am so blessed to have him on the show because he talks about some really important stuff that we're going to dig into today. So welcome to the show, Cody.
Thanks for having me. I'm a fan, so I'm pumped and honored to be on here.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell us your story a little bit. I want to start with how you got into where you're at today, because obviously it doesn't just like happen. So what got you started in the field you're in? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your business and what you do and how you help people.
For sure, yeah. So I've been always fascinated by the brain and neuroscience, and so I come into the therapy and like coaching space from as a scientist. So it's kind of an interesting journey. So I've always been interested in the brain, even from when I was young, like all the way back in middle school. There was an exhibit at my school, and like I was just fascinated by the brain and how the mind, brain, and body are connected. And so that's where the brain kind of started. Then in college, I was studying how trauma affects the brain. At that point, it was like physical trauma, like TBI or traumatic brain injuries, like physical trauma to the brain. And that was really interesting in studying how inflammation and things like that affect the nervous system, like the nervous system's immune system and all that kind of stuff. And so that was really, really interesting. Then I got out into the real world and started working at a like organizational psychology type company, which is really cool. I learned a little bit more of the psychology side, but still like pretty hardcore on the neuroscience. Cognitive behavioral neuroscience is what my degree is in. So I always kind of, those are my roots. But then I learned a lot more about the psychology space, started a couple companies that didn't necessarily work out. And I was at a point where I was just like, holy crap. Like I've tried two or three companies now. Like some of the stuff, it just hasn't been working. I was just kind of like, and the company I had just like stopped working at, or like not stop work, close shop. Like I was the founder. So I like closed shop and let people go. It was a whole thing. I was just kind of like dejected. And so I was like, okay, I need to go back to my roots. This company, I was kind of following what other people said I should do as opposed to like what I'm passionate about. And what I'm passionate about is brain science and how trauma affects the mind, brain, and body. And that's what my research has always been focused on. And that's what I've always been helping people with. And so that's where Mind Brain Body Lab was kind of started. I decided, okay, like let's start posting on social media. I've always loved like talking about things and simplifying things and making complicated topics much simpler for people. And so I was like, we'll start posting on social media and we'll see what happens. And so we started posting videos on social media and we got a lot of traction around trauma, narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse, toxic relationships, things like that. And at the same time, I was diving deeper into like a master's PhD track and getting trained in something called internal family systems
Mm,
psychotherapy,
yeah,
which is hell yeah. Okay,
I
cool.
bet.
So
Yeah.
that's what I'm trained in. And that's the type of psychotherapy that I practice with my clients almost exclusively because I love it. And then I
Yeah.
blend that in with like my research in cognitive behavioral neuroscience and psychoneuroimmunology is what I research and study more specifically now, which is again just a really fancy word for how the mind, brain, and body store, release, and work through trauma. And so that kind of led me to where I'm at today and what I do today. And so the three legs of Mind Brain Body Lab are content. 99% of all of everything I know, everything I research, all of the results from anything that I do, I give away for free. 1% of people need help with direct therapy or coaching, and I can help them one on one, or we have a group, like a membership that is like a group coaching model to heal together. It's a huge piece of healing. So those are two of the legs. And then the last one is something called My Companion, which is like a trauma therapist in your pocket. It's an AI companion tool that'll be released at the end of 2024. And those are kind of the three legs of what Mind Brain Body Lab is doing at the current moment.
Oh, I love that. Well, I got about halfway into Frank Anderson's book on, yeah, IFS, and it blew my mind because
Yeah.
it's helped me so much in my trauma journey and like just overcoming like not a lot of people know that I was in a super abusive relationship for like 4 years and just like totally didn't see that I was in this super narcissistic relationship.
Mm,
And my sister one day came up to me and was like, Alaina, the fuck are you doing? like you do you not see what's happening? And I was like, no. And then it
I
got
can't.
really, 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 really bad. And I ended up being able to exit the relationship, but like it screwed me up, man. I was like, this is what I thought love was, and then going to 2 years with no partner. And then I met my husband and I'm like, that's what I want, and just being able
Nice.
to step back and be like, okay, what am I searching for, right? What piece of me is missing? Or like, how am I going into these relationships and continuing to meet the same guy, and then boom,
Yeah.
I met a new version of myself, and then I met my now partner of 9 years. But
Wow.
yeah, internal family systems. Maybe you can dig a little bit more into that because I met my inner child through that process and it's really served me well.
Yeah, I love IFS. It's based in brain science, and so I love it. Obviously, again, I scientist that kind of came over into the therapy space. So I've always appreciated it, and just has always clicked for me. Like I've never not gotten it. From the second I heard it, I was like, yes, I get it 100%, and I started using it right away. And so the if you're thinking about IFS, there's two big principles you got to understand about it that I think are super profound and helpful. The first concept is that we're made of parts. A lot of people say this language is kind of in the social media space, like a part of me this, a part of me that, but it's not explicitly described. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? The
Right.
theory goes back to multiplicity and the theory, multiple self theory. So there used to be the thought process that like multiple personality disorder, right? That used to be like a diagnosis. Dissociative identity disorder, DID, is where it's at today. But multiple self theory and multiplicity, the concept that we're talking about here, is this concept that we all have sub personalities. And this has been, so many people have talked about this in the history of like psychology and stuff. But there are these different, like you show up differently in different environments and different places with different people and things like that. Like you are slightly different when you're at church versus when you're at a party, right? People get that. Or people have also had the thought process, well, a part of me wants to do this and a part of me wants to do that. If you've been in an abusive relationship, you are very familiar with this feeling, especially if you are trauma bonded to that relationship, because a part of you wants to stay and a part of you wants to go. And so that's kind of the concept of parts. And IFS considers those parts extraordinarily valid and like very legitimate. And so that's one concept of IFS is internal family systems, is the family system, right? That family systems part of it is the family system of is I know all these parts inside of you create like a little family in you. We can get to more of that in a second. So that's the first concept. The second concept is this concept of self. And it's the concept, it's kind of an interesting one. If you look at like Darwinism and some religious concepts that you were born bad, IFS would disagree. You're born good. You're born as the self. The self is calm, connected, curious, compassionate, creative, connected. They call them the 8 C's of self or whatever, or synonyms of those things. And just think about it. Like think about kids before they are tainted by the world. Okay. They are calm. They're connected. They're curious little kids. And we're born that way. And then the world has a way of damaging ourselves. And we're too young to emotionally regulate. And so the parts that I just talked about, they have to take on different roles to protect the self. And this self is the ultimate healing mechanism inside of IFS, which is why it's way different than most therapies, because you're not forming an attachment with me, the therapist. You're forming an attachment with yourself in you. And it's why I think it is a far stronger form of therapy than anything, because if you become dependent on me and you have to co-regulate with me, if I go on like paternity or maternity leave, whatever, or I retire or something, then it's like, oh, you're up the creek without a paddle. But in IFS, yourself becomes the internal parent, the internal leader of your system, and helps you. You can start to regulate and co-regulate with that self and your parts. And so those are two really big concepts of IFS. And I can dive further into the different types of parts, and we can go way more in depth if you want. But that's kind of the big picture. Any questions on that, or is that clear?
I love it. I think it's really important that people identify those pieces of themselves or parts of themselves that are there because it's ever changing as well. And when we
Mm,
identify those parts of ourselves that are like, okay, what am I looking for right now? I'm looking for comfort, but I'm going to food, or I'm looking for companionship, but I'm going to Netflix, or, whatever it is for that person. Everyone's different, but if you can identify what you need in that moment, it's so powerful.
yeah, I 100% agree. And the other thing I love about IFS is it's not pathological. It doesn't look at diagnoses. People come to me all the time. I always ask, what are your labels? So they're like, what? I was like, what labels have you been given so far? Like, let's talk about those. Oh, I've got anxiety. I'm BPD. I'm OCD. I've got depression. I'm this. I'm that, or whatever.
ADHD, yeah.
ADHD. That's a really common one. And they've been giving these labels, and they're identifying with those things. So I am anxious is far different than a part of me is anxious. And so IFS is not pathological. It's all makes sense inside of the system. And that these parts are acting out, whether they're firefighters or they're trying to control something if they're managers to prevent some bad thing from happening, which is an exile like explosion or release type of thing. And it's not pathological. Even extraordinarily sensitive topics like self-harm, self-injury, suicidal thoughts, things like that, when looked at in the frame of IFS, are not shamed. They're not pathologized. And that is why I freaking love IFS so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think today, with the state of the world, it's a big conversation to be having, because there's a lot more people who are open to going, oh, it's not just me. So I'm actually a financial advisor by trade. Like, that's my full-time
Oh,
gig.
nice.
And I sit here with people every single day, and I see fear and anxiety and struggle and frustration and just like feeling like they don't have enough. And yet, by the time that they're leaving my office, I'm getting them dreaming again. I'm getting them thinking about their future and focusing on what good they can take from how far they've come, and understanding that they're not alone. And I think that people right now are really struggling with not only their finances, but their mental capacity. And everyone is in a different place. But I think if we can all band together, then talk about it. Like we were talking about earlier with my struggles. And I'm like, well, if I just talk about it, I can get help, you know? And that's why I love what you do with your social media, especially because you're talking about everything that people are struggling with. So it's literally like a little, every time you watch a reel, you know? I
Heck
love
yeah.
that. Yeah. So, what do you see on a regular basis? Like people that are coming to you for one-to-one coaching, what do you think they're struggling with the most? Is there specific trends that you're seeing quite often that you can maybe help people work through?
Yeah, I see a lot of, again, I work a lot after abusive relationships or like childhood trauma that has led them into abusive relationships and things like that. So a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing are polarized parts. So like I mentioned earlier, trauma bonds, that's a really common one. Hypervigilance, low self-esteem. Hypervigilance meaning like you startle easy or you're always trying to predict like the next bad thing type of thing. I
Mm,
see a lot of empaths and people pleasers. Low self-esteem is a really big one. I mentioned that already, but that's kind of a linchpin of a lot of them. And
yeah.
then dysregulated nervous systems. That's a big piece of what I work on with people. Is it's not just talking about trauma doesn't make it better. In
Mhm.
fact, it generally is re-traumatizing. Working through releasing your nervous system, and that's a lot of where I come from, is like that's where my research kind of blends into the coaching and therapy that I do, because I'm looking at like people are like, oh, trauma stored in the body. It's like, okay, but is it really? Or the body keeps a score. They see the title of the book and they think they know what it is, but it's like, what? What? Your body does not keep the score. Your brain keeps the score. Your body is the scoreboard.
Mm,
So like understanding that a lot of stuff is going on in your nervous system and releasing your nervous system. So I see a lot of people coming to me with, I have trauma stored in my body. I have to get rid of it. I have to do this. I have to do that. But their nervous system is in no way, shape, or form ready to release trauma. And so it's this balancing act between balancing their mind, their brain, and their body. Because a lot of traditional therapy, people come to me and they're like, traditional therapy didn't work, and like I've gone through 50 therapists and they just had me talk about my stuff and I never did anything, blah 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 blah. And so it's very mind focused generally, but they forget about the brain and the body or the nervous system in the body. And so what I'm generally doing is trying to find a balancing act. Okay, like what's going on in the mind? Okay, anxiety, stress, depression, memory loss, brain fog, mood swings, all the stuff, got it. What part of that is from the brain and the nervous system? What part of that is like going on from something happening in the body? Your body budget's off. If you don't sleep well the night before and you're anxious the next day, that's not real anxiety, right? That's your body budget. Your body saying, hey, dude, we need to
You gotta
sleep some
fix
more.
this.
Like,
Yeah.
fix this, please. So those would be some of the common things that I would say that was kind of a long-winded explanation, but those would be some of the most common things I see, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of people that are coming in with, oh, I have these trauma bonds, or oh, I'm in an abusive relationship, but I don't know how to exit it, or I don't want to exit it because there's the father of my children, or whatever that is. And it's like, yeah, but then what are you teaching your kids to like stay in this relationship that's super unhealthy? You know?
It's such a huge point right there. Kids learn through observation and reflection almost more than anything. Parents
Yeah.
ask me questions. I don't see kids personally, but I just know how I know neurodevelopment, like, and that's how our brain, like parents, like my kid, I have an iPad kid and they're always on their thing. I'm like, okay, are you on your phone at dinner? Are you on your phone when you're in the bathroom? Are you on your phone when you're in bed? Are you on your phone, like in the living room when you're watching TV, trying to hang out? Like, are you on your phone when they're playing a sport?
Right.
What are they seeing?
Yeah.
They're watching your behavior and they're learning from that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a wild time. Raising a little child, a little baby brain would be a huge responsibility. So I do not envy them.
Overstimulation. Yeah. I see it all the time with like one of my nephews is just like super into video games, and the other, like my niece, is really into art and that kind of thing. And she's just so different from him, but like it's interesting watching them grow and develop and like learn their habits and reflect back on like how they became who they are. And then you reflect on yourself and go, okay, well, what are some of my habits and like how do I treat people? And it's very eye-opening, to say the least.
Yes, it is. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think you should stay just, no, I'm not a therapist, but I don't think you should stay in a relationship just for your children because they're seeing that you're miserable, and that's not good, right? Like my mom, I come from a broken family. My dad left when I was 2 years old and went to rehab, and he's been clean ever since. So clearly he made the right decision. And I'm like, I don't hold that against him, but I'm the only one in my family that associates. And I'm like, interesting how they haven't forgiven or they haven't pursued a relationship with him. And I'm like in my 30s, and I'm like, no, I want to have a relationship with my dad because I don't care what happened 30 years ago. That's a different version of him. And so it's interesting looking at how each of us has progressed in our relationship with our father versus, yeah, our mom, who's a gem. So,
Yeah, yeah,
anyway.
it's huge.
I think I'd love to talk about relationships and business partners as well. I think that when you're in a relationship with your business partner, it's like, well, how do we do this? There's communication and making it work together, and even not even like your romantic partner, but like these are my friends I'm going into business with, or how do I make this work? Maybe you could dig into just a little bit more about communication and being a good business partner, being a good partner in general.
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of personal experience with this. I've been in a business with my intimate partner, and I'm getting into business with some friends and stuff as well. So some of the big things that I would suggest are some are basic communication things, some are like operations agreements and legal things. We can get that deep if you want. We can stay on the communication side, but communication wise is setting expectations and being really clear about some of this stuff, especially around like money and things. That's one of the things I found can get kind of weird if one half has ideas and kind of the business and kind of what they think they want to do, and one half has more capital and things like that. The blending of those two things is interesting. So you want to be very clear, like, okay, like if this goes to zero, are you okay with 50,000 of your dollars going to zero? And like just being bottom line with that. Not that you're going to try to make that happen, obviously, but being clear about that. And that's one example because it's a very inflammatory example with money, but it can even be, we have a joint mission. We both want to be doing these things right now. What if in the future one of us wants to do something different, or we want to take a different path, or we don't want to be in the business anymore? Like, how does that work? And what I suggest is creating a joint Google Doc or Word doc or whatever, where you can kind of both write everything down in layman's terms. Like just write it all down, like without any of the BS, and just be really bluff, bottom line up front, right? Bottom line up bluff. And just say very, very directly what you want, how you'd want it to go. And in English, plain English, no like lawyer stuff. That's later. You give the lawyer this really basic document, but between the two of you, start there with a really basic document. Like, here are my expectations. Here are things that are like, will never be okay with me. If we start treating people like they're ants as opposed to respecting them and caring about them, like, I can't do that. I'm not trying to just fuel this capitalistic thing. Like, I want to be about that. I care about humans type of thing. So, and talk about that and make it in plain English, and make sure that when you both write down your purpose, what is the overarching mission? Like, my mission is all over my website and everything is to help 1 billion people create happiness and purpose in their life. Right? That simple, but not easy. But if someone didn't have that purpose or mission, probably shouldn't, not a good partnership, probably shouldn't go there. If the why is similar, then we can figure out different hows and stuff. Those would be some of the basic, a couple things. Like, make sure you align on purpose and values, and then make sure to write down super plain English. I can dive way deeper if you want into some of that, because then there's like making operations agreement and equity and all sorts of stuff. But those would be some of the highlights, or high level stuff. I mean,
I love that. Even just like setting the standard, like, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to do it this way and not this way. I think that's a big part of team culture as well. And when you're bringing other people into the organization, it's crucial to recruit the right people. And if you have the wrong people, they create a cancer in your business, and it's not good. And you shouldn't just bring people on to have more people. But I see that a lot in small businesses, is they're like, okay, when do I hire people? When do I bring more people in? It's like, well, do you need more people, or are you just making work so that you can like feel like a big shot? And I know when I first started in business, I wanted to feel like a big shot. And then I was like, I have this assistant doing work that I could be doing, you know? And I wasn't at the financial place in my business where I could support that. And I was like, to debt just to have staff. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is stupid. And then fast forward 5 years, I was like, okay, well, obviously I need help. And I couldn't have done it without my assistant. But it's funny how we adapt over time and realize what our standards are and how much it's important to focus on our core values. And like you said, having that purpose-driven mission when you're going into your business, because I think people start businesses and don't really set those standards for themselves, and then they fail and they don't understand why they're failing, because they're in these relationships with these people. And it's like you said, well, this person's the capital and this person's the entrepreneur, right? And if they're both going in, it's like, well, you're not doing as much work as I am. Well, I'm giving you the money to go and, do all of this work. And it can just get a little sticky. So I like that you're focused on putting it on paper and helping everyone understand what the objective is. Because when you're, in those beginning stages, it's just like brain dumping. You just got to put it on paper. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this too is having a joint thing you can go do. So many entrepreneurs and business people waste so much of their time at the start of a company, like, oh, I need to get this logo right. I need to have the right slogan. I need to have the right this. Like, you need to market, sell, and deliver your product to 10 people. And then we can start talking about some of that stuff. Maybe you don't need a website. You don't need maybe you need a landing page. Like you need to go find customers and can like get money, sell something, market your product, and deliver on your product or service before anything. Otherwise, it's just semantics. And people waste so much freaking time with this idea they think is perfect in their head. And they get all this money and get all this. They do all of the things except for going and doing the thing. And it drives me crazy when I talk with young entrepreneurs and things like that. I'm like, okay, cool. Have you sold that to anybody yet? And they're like, what? How could I sell that to somebody? I was like, what do you mean? How can you sell it to somebody? Literally call someone, call your brother and say, hey, I'm thinking about starting this company by doing this thing. Would you invest $1 in me today? It doesn't have to be rocket science. Get a freaking dollar. If you can't ask for $1 from your brother, you're never going to succeed in business. Like, I'm not trying to be an ass. I'm just like bottom line it. Like, you've got to be able to go make those asks and get that feedback from people, because it's the only way. What I sell today is literally not at all what I in my head would have thought I would be selling necessarily, but it's because I went out and did it, not talked about it or like thought about it. Or you got to go get feedback in the market. Like, I'm a scientist at the end of the day and a business guy. Act, assess, adjust, act, assess, adjust in a circle. Just do it over and over again. I call it the action cycle. It's a scientific method for business, right? Okay. So I'm very passionate about that point.
I think that brings us back to self-esteem and how people are
Mhm.
lacking in that area. And I know for myself, when I first started in business 8.5 years ago, it was like I was literally just like this meek little mouse who was like, I don't want to talk to people, and I was super nervous. And now I'm like, put me on stage, coach. It's so
Hey,
different. But I see a lot of people who come into my business, especially that are like, man, I don't want to talk to people about their finances. I don't want, like these are hard conversations to have. And I'm like,
yeah.
uh-huh. But when you hold space for people and you can give them an opportunity to change their life, they freaking love you.
Yep.
And you give them an opportunity to think differently. And
Mm.
it helps you reassess that self-esteem. And everyone's like, oh, Alaina, you're so confident. And I'm like, I'm really not that confident. I'm not that confident. It's just, I have belief in myself that I'm going to figure it out, you know? But maybe you could give some tips on increasing
I
your
would I
self-esteem.
would challenge that. I think you do have confidence because confidence is an action moving forward. So it is. If you say you don't, you don't. But I would suggest challenging that part of you that thinks you don't have confidence, if I may.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, anytime, because you don't start a company if you don't have some level of self esteem or like some level of like I believe in myself at least enough that I can go figure this out. Like that's huge. It's
Yeah.
very brave for you to go do that, especially with all the things that you've gone through in your life. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, that's the thing. When you're in those moments, like I have a couple people on my team who are like, I can't believe you're working right now. And I'm like, what else would I be doing? Sitting at home crying? Like, that sounds terrible. So I'm going to do something to empower myself today. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to go to yoga and meet some new people. And today I'm having lunch with a lady that I met at a cafe. And I was doing planning for a personal development meeting I'm doing. And I was like, just having this awesome conversation with this girl, and a lady came up to our table and was like, I want to be in on this conversation. Like, this is amazing. And I was talking about my losses, and I was just like being vulnerable and going through,
Nice.
hey, this is where I'm at, because am I at a place where I can talk freely about it? No. I still have work to do, but at the same time, it's just identifying that it's okay to be in the position of sadness and grief and frustration. But it's, for me, not okay to just sit there and wallow in it. And dealing with it is one thing, like feeling the emotions and doing some breathing exercises. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about meditation as well and how that can help people, because it has really helped me in my last couple of years of just learning about it and developing my meditation practice and attracting things to myself that I actually want. But at the same time, it's like, why am I not getting the things that I want? I don't know. But can I control it? No. So what can I do? I can control how I react to that situation. And so for myself, I lost the baby December 14th. And January 1st, I was like, this is a new year. I'm not going to sit here and still like go into that Netflix mode of just like downward spiral. I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to go for a walk first thing in the morning. I'm going to hang out with my dog and do things that bring me joy and just really focus, like you were saying, on bringing people happiness. Because for
Nice.
myself, I get a lot of fulfillment out of contribution. And I'm like, okay, so my word of the year is contribution. And I'm like, how can I focus on just giving back to people? And so I was just like, what can I do? And so I came to my office and I like set up my trophies, and just
Nice.
I sat there and was just like, all right, what can I do to bring myself joy today? And not too much focus on how can I make money in my business or what do I need to do with my team? Or, I was just like easing myself back into it and going, okay, what's going to make me feel good today and bring me one step closer to my goals? And so I came in and I organized. I got myself strategically organized. I set up my office. I made it feel good to me. And then I went home and I took some time and I did some meditation and went for another walk with my dog because I live right beside a nice little forested area. And I just like sat in the forest and listened to the birds and the water, and it was so beautiful and peaceful. And then I was like, okay, I can move forward. I don't have to stay in this pain. And it was really empowering to just figure out what it was for me that was going to bring me back down to, okay, I can move forward and not stay stuck in that spot. But I think people do get stuck in those spots quite often, and they don't understand how you move forward. They're like, you're so strong and you're so, I'm like, okay, I am resilient. Like, I am resilient. And I have that belief in myself that I pulled a card one time because I have some angel cards. Anyways, I pulled a spirit animal card and it was like a grizzly bear. And it says, grizzly bear, power. I am indestructible. And I was like, yeah, like, yes.
Nice.
Because in that moment, that's exactly what I needed to hear. Because I was feeling down and defeated and frustrated, and just like, why me was running through my head. Because I'm like, man, I'm going to be a great mom, I'm going to be an incredible wife to my husband, like just these things about myself that I'm like, I can have joy. I don't need to stay in this sadness. And then I am indestructible. And I was like, all right, next, let's keep moving forward, right? Honor that inner child. What does that inner child need? That inner child needs some time to play. So go in the forest and sit with the fairies, or, like go in the forest and hang out with the birds and just have fun sometimes. And I think a lot of people forget to have fun. That's a big thing. Like, we should have
I
fun.
couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'd be curious if you couldn't do all of the things that you were just describing, what would you have to sit with?
Oh, pain. A lot of pain. A lot of doubt, a lot of frustration, especially in the beginning when I was just really postpartum. It was very heavy and almost felt like there was something missing. And I had the loop repeating in my brain of the childbirthing process. And it was awful. And I thought about it and I was like, man, imagine if I was still a heavy equipment operator and I was sitting in a haul truck for 12 hours a day, listening to people bitch and complain on the radio constantly. I'm like, just in this, like, I couldn't imagine how terrible that would be. And yet people
Mhm.
do it all the time. And I'm so grateful. So it was in those moments that I found gratitude for my business, for my team. I hit some record months. Like, November was a record month, and I found out my baby was going to die. Like, okay, what do I need to do? I need to step back for a minute, and like take that time for myself and just honor my body and be with my husband and, sit with myself and let myself heal. And boom, hit like just records in my business. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. So if I had to sit with it and I was still a heavy equipment operator, I would probably be crying 80% of the day and just feeling empty and lost and frustrated because it's not working out the way that I want it to. But I don't know. I know there's a piece of myself that is missing in not having a family, but I'm like, I am a mother and I can identify as a mother because I have given birth. I just didn't get to enjoy my baby.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Have you talked to that part before? Have you talked to that part that like wants a family or is upset by not being able to do the things that you're describing? Or that one that feels the immense amount of pain and sadness, maybe guilt, like those types of things?
Mm. Directly, no.
It's just interesting because those are exiled emotions a lot of the times, and a lot of the what you're describing in a way is a lot of doing, right? You're a human doing, but not a human being.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of doing that happens by managers and firefighters to get you away from exiles that they think will never stop, will be too much, that you can't deal with, that will be unleashed and take over your whole life, that will never like you let out sadness or grief and it just is continuous and flowing forever. And so there's a lot of doing that happens a lot of the times to stay away from those exiles and those scary, big, huge, painful emotions that you think don't have a solution. And it's just something that I observe a lot in people that they're human doings, not human beings, which is a big delineation because you don't have to do something to find joy. There's joy in you. That's
Mm,
what you already are that. You don't
mm,
have to go do something to find joy or peace or calm. You are calm. You are like we all are born that way. You know what I mean?
yeah. No, I love that. So what advice would you give me in that situation? Because I know there's a
So I
lot of
mean,
people. I mean, my situation's a little bit different than most, but I know there's a lot of people in a similar situation who are just putting that emotion off to the side and like, we don't want to talk about that. But now it's like,
yeah.
this is a piece of me for the rest of my life. This is my story, right? And
Mhm.
so if I don't honor myself in those moments, then I am just like pushing it down, and that's not healthy.
Not at all, and it does not lead to good places almost ever because it takes quite a bit of nervous system, like a lot of energy to maintain that. Like imagine your entire life trying to keep a balloon underwater or a beach ball underwater, and that beach ball just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's more and more pressure for it to try and erupt up. It takes an immense amount of nervous system energy um, and like glucose to do that neurologically. So it does not lead to good places. The suggestion I would make comes like straight from IFS. If you know IFS, I mean, it would be all of the doing that you're describing, all mapping those out as parts of you. There's an achiever part of you, maybe. There's a part of you that the spiritual part of you. There's no bad parts. These
Mm.
protectors just want to help keep you safe from that X out emotion. And so going and being kind of a hope merchant to those protected parts, the part that wants to like you to go do this thing to get away from the exile or whatever it is, go talk to that part and have a conversation with that protector and all of those protectors at first. Like the binging Netflix was one that you mentioned. That's kind of like in the firefighter camp, which is like react and distract. Like I'm going to distract her from this grief so that's a firefighter in IFS terms, or the achieving, maybe. Like, I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to go organize all of my stuff and make sure that my business is operating and do all this stuff. Like, that's a doer, that's a prefrontal cortex manager. And both of them are trying to save you in some way from having to feel or experience the grief or the pain that you described. And so being able to go be a hope merchant to those protectors from yourself and say, hey, did you know that I can actually handle this? That those I can go rescue that exiled emotion and I can bring it out of that pain and unite it with the rest of my parts, and it doesn't last forever. You're still going to have a role here. I still want you to be a part of this, like our family system and things, and just go be that hope merchant to those firefighters and managers. And the majority of the time, those managers and firefighters, like the doer, like the achiever, or the binge, like watching binge Netflix type thing, they'll be like, "Oh my god, thank God, I'm so tired. Like, holy crap! Like, I just want to take a break. I just want to chill. I don't want to have to do all this stuff." It is, and they're so relieved to find that there is an internal parent, which is yourself, to take over the reins and take back leadership of the system, so they don't have to do those things. They're just scared. They think if I don't do this, then grief or pain will get out and it'll be never ending. And that is going to hurt. That's going to hurt us really, really bad. And the last time that happened when I was a kid or whatever the time in the past when they picked up the role, because it wasn't just this moment that created this role in you. It is a moment from long ago, right? These managers and firefighters are single digit years old most of the time. They're kids, they're children running around with their heads cut off because they don't know what to do. They just know that what they did in the past helped you then, so it'll probably help you now. But now you're 30 something. A big difference between the resources and availability that you have, the friend group, your ability to cope and regulate, even the breathing and going and spending time in nature, some of the things that you're talking about, maybe you just didn't even know about those when you were 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. So
Mhm.
these parts don't know that. They're stuck in the past. So you got to update them. And so working with those protectors is always the first step. And then being able to go to that exile and work with that exile, go to that moment that it is traumatized in and have a conversation, like an exile release. I could use my IFS language and stuff, but you can go to that exile emotion and have a conversation with it. Go to that part of you that's stuck. Trauma is like gravity. It locks these traumatized parts in a trauma loop. And those young parts of you are just like re-experiencing that pain over and over and over and over and over. So they don't go away and they just keep getting re-traumatized. You can kind of think about it like gravity. The self is like anti-gravity. When the self comes into that traumatic moment, it opens up and releases that exile from having to be planted in that memory and gives it the ability to escape and leave. And so you don't have to bear that burden anymore. And that part doesn't have to bear that burden. And in fact, it can welcome in like beautiful, beautiful things. There's a jewel in every exile. There's some wisdom in every exile. And when you release its burden, you can then see that jewel. You can then see what it's been holding and that wisdom. Our most traumatized parts oftentimes are our wisest parts as well. We're just scared of them. So we never learn.
Yeah. So it was last weekend, 2 weekends ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago now. I went to a business conference and I saw everybody, and everyone's like, "Oh, how's your pregnancy going?" And I was like,
Oof.
"Oh, not so good, non-existent
Yeah.
at this point." And then they're like, "Oh my gosh." Anyway, so it was a lot
Wow.
weekend. But I came home and I had a day with my cousin who I don't get to see very often, but I was sitting on the ferry because I live on Vancouver Island, and I was sitting on the ferry going across to Vancouver. And it's like an hour and 40 minutes. And I was like, okay, I'm going to sit in the sunshine and just like enjoy the beauty of nature and do a
Nice.
meditation. And I was just sitting there like happy crying because it was just so magnificent to be able to release some of that pain and
Mm,
sit with it and go, hey, it's okay. And crazy what happens after. So I get to Vancouver and I had this beautiful, majestic ferry ride where there was no one really around me. I didn't really care. I just kind of was present in that moment and looking for joy and peace. And I was like, okay, I got through that weekend and I was really nervous about those moments in particular. And I was like, okay, I did it. I did it. And then
nice.
I got across to Vancouver and I'm driving to my cousin's house and I'm stuck in traffic. And I'm like, freaking Vancouver, I hate it here. Anyways, so I look over and I have like a big eagle tattoo on my back,
Nice.
my grandparents. Anyways, that's a long story, but I look over and there's two eagles in this tree with a little baby eagle. And I was like, that's my grandparents watching my baby.
Nice.
And it was just in that moment that I was like, okay, it's okay. And there was just a big release for me in that moment because I was just like, crazy how you can just breathe through these moments of pain, but also like look for those little pieces of solitude and like comfort when you're just being more open to feeling those emotions and going through those painful moments and still giving yourself that credit for, hey, I got through it, or hey, I was able to be present with myself and not try and run away. And
Right.
then
Nice.
boom, I had that moment of peace. And it's always birds for me, which is really funny. But like 3 days after we lost them, there was a dove in our tree. And like you never see doves. And I was like, there's a freaking dove in my tree right now. And it's just like, okay, you got to find those moments of peace within your day and just honor those moments because you don't get them all the time. And when you can identify them, there's so much that you can just release through. I don't know. It's very
I
powerful
love it.
for me.
Heck yeah. I love to hear that for you. That's
Uh,
cool.
yeah. Anyways. Okay. Well, we're running out of time. So I want you to be able to maybe just touch on how people can heal themselves outside of what they're currently doing. I do think that IFS is very, very useful and people should do more research into that. But closing up, any finishing success tips you want to give people or tips to overcome these relationships that they're struggling with, and then also how to get a hold of you.
Sure. Yeah. So in relation to relationships, safety is a big one that I talk about a lot. People always ask me like, what's the first step? And people don't realize how unsafe their nervous system feels. Um, and so being able to get out is obviously number one. Going no contact, kind of getting out of those relationships. I have heard every single reason why someone can't go no contact, like on earth. I've got kids with them. We're in a company together. I get it. Limiting your contact. Like there's always a way to like make it less hope generally, or gray rock, or interact through some type of digital means as opposed to in person, different things like that that can help you. So getting out is always huge because external safety is the most important number one first step. Like create external safety around you, the people, places, and things. If there are friends that support or were friends with your abusive partner or something like that, maybe not the best place. Or if there are places that remind you of abuse, or if there are things that are not supporting your external safety that are still in your life, work on that environment because your environment is a large predictor of your behavior and your mental and emotional health. And so start to look at that. Okay. If you got out of the relationship and you are a circle, but you have squares all around you, those squares will predict you back into a square if you do not put circles around you. So you have to like create an external environment that will support your mental and emotional health and your healing journey externally. That will also help your nervous system open up because if trauma is locked in your nervous system or whatever, like between my hands, external safety opens it up a little bit. And now you can maybe see that the piece of trauma that's in there. All right. So you've got some external safety and you're opening up your nervous system a little bit. Internal safety is the next step. Is trying to figure out, okay, like how do I start to figure out like what are my emotions? Where are they coming from? What am I feeling? What are my parts? Mapping out your managers, your firefighters, your protectors, and creating space in you, whether it's like a literal mental safe space in your head, a physical safe space, like nature seems to be a huge one for you, which is awesome. I love that. It's beautiful. There's so many benefits of nature for your nervous system. But that can create an internal felt sense of safety. That's internal safety. And this can also be a body part that feels safe. I've got a lot of people that I work with whose their bodies don't feel safe to them to be in. So they intellectualize everything and they think about things and they rationalize things. They dissociate and they're upstairs a lot. They're not in their bodies because their body doesn't feel safe. So you got to find a place in your body that feels safe. That's part of internal safety as well. It's like your earlobe maybe, or the tip of your nose, or the bottom of your elbow. Like trust me, I've had some wild places in people's bodies because they don't feel safe at all, a lot of the times. That's internal safety. So external safety opens up your nervous system a little bit. Internal safety opens it up even more. And then being able to beat the fear. Fear is kind of the third step, is beating that fear of going to those exiled emotions. I don't suggest you go to exiled emotions by yourself. There's a very specific process to remove an exile from a traumatic moment. There's a fair amount of like spiritual bypassing or like psychedelic stuff that is trying to do exile work without getting permission from managers. It creates a lot of backlash and it's like very dangerous. It can be dangerous, but I would suggest being able to have conversations with anxiety or panic or frustration or anger, which are very big, powerful emotions that can be very scary because your chest gets tight and you get that sympathetic state that's in your body. However, when you're healing trauma, that's your nervous system coming back on. So just consider that your nervous system was in this frozen state where it was numb and dissociated for so long that now that you're coming back into your nervous system, you're going to go through this sympathetic experience, which is anger, panic, worry, frustration, irritation, like these big sympathetic emotions that feel scary. And that's the fear, beating the fear of fear. And just consider that that is your nervous system coming on. And 90 seconds after the onset of something scary, there's almost always something positive. And so I see a lot of people that spend 30 years, 90 seconds away from breakthrough because they never really get through that initial 90 seconds of fear. And I've done it myself even. So it's not like I'm preaching to the choir myself. I've been there, especially with anxiety and like panic attacks and stuff. It's terrifying. And so external safety, internal safety, and then beating that fear of fear will put you on the right path a lot of the times in relation to healing, especially how your nervous system is concerned. And once your nervous system is opened up and you've beaten that fear of fear, now some of the top down stuff can be way more effective. And that's why I love IFS, because it's bottom up and top down as far as like a therapy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I know you've helped a lot of people today, and including myself. I'm sitting here just going, I've got some work to do. But I love that I'm like, okay, now my next step is mapping out my parts. I'm like, okay, I can work through this. And that's the manager taking over, of course. But yeah, I want people to get more access to you because you're amazing and your content is amazing and you're doing incredible things to help people. And I know you're going to hit that goal of helping 1 billion people find happiness because you're focused on it, right? So where can people find you and get more access to you?
Yeah, at Mind Brain Body Lab on any social media platform. It's the same exact username on all of them. So it's at Mind Brain Body Lab. And then, surprise, surprise, our website is mindbrainbodylab.com. And that's where you can see different services we offer, like our blog, all sorts of different things on there as well. And our social media is linked on there as well. So either way you go about it, you'll arrive at the same places. So either on social media or on our website, it's all mindbrainbodylab.com or at mindbrainbodylab.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for being on today. I know that there's a lot of people out there going, I need to go and follow this guy. And I follow you too. So that's appreciated. And one final thing, I like to bring earth to me sometimes. So I have like a moss agate as my
Nice.
today because I didn't get to go for a walk this morning. So I did something for myself to, bring nature to me. But
Heck yeah.
that's a part of the healing, right? So I think
That's
finding
awesome.
those little pieces that help you is really important. And there's a lot of people out there that are struggling. So yeah, this is going to be a really good helper for a lot of people.
I love it. I've got my little rock thing, crystal
Oh,
thing that I
cool.
carry with me as well.
Citrine.
Kind of, I don't know what it is necessarily. I'm not huge into it, but I found this and I was like, oh, this is different than everything I found like on this little trail. So I keep it with me. I have all sorts of little random things on here. Like I have a little like plastic chicken. It reminds me to don't be a chicken.
I love that.
Just
That's
kind of funny stuff to remind me. So
yeah.
I love that you have that little pendant.
I have like seashells because I'm
Hey,
manifesting Hawaii, little things like that.
wow.
Or like my little Hawaii tiki mug.
Nice.
Like my little, yeah, buddy.
It's crazy you want to go to Hawaii. One of my clients is in Hawaii, so it's wild that you bring up Hawaii.
That's great. Yeah, there's a company trip that goes every year for all the qualifiers, and that achiever piece of me is like, we're gonna qualify. It's my screensaver. Like, we're gonna make it happen. Yeah, it's so cool. But anyways, all right, we gotta close off. So thank you again for being here. Much appreciated, guys. This is a holistically grown show. So just make sure if you got value out of today's show, share it with a friend or tag someone in it who you think it can help. Go get access to Cody on mindbrainbodylab.com or any of his social media. I'll throw that in the show notes for you. But that is Pursuit of Relentless signing out for today.